when we meet somebody, we're seeing them in that specific chapter in their life. We're not seeing the whole book in that one moment. A person isn't just that one thing in one moment. We're seeing so many different parts of them.
Welcome to Lime Listen and Learn, the People Leadership Lounge. If you're new here, a lime is a Trinidadian way of gathering. So it's unhurried, relational, and rooted in conversation. It's a kind of space where people pull up, settle in, and we just talk about what's really going on. I'm your host, Abbiola Ballah, founder of Fern Education Studios, where I support professionals and organizations navigating uncomfortable workplace conversations through one-on-one coaching and the Clearer Conversations Lab. So this is not an interview in the traditional sense, it's a line. So you'll hear us thinking out loud, making connections, setting intention, laughing when we laugh, and staying with the conversation as it unfolds. So pull up, settle in, let's get into it. Today, I am liming with Sara Chandran, and we're getting into the complexities of identity and leadership, some personal journeys of self-discovery, impact of past experience on present identities, importance of disclosure, and the role of empathy in leadership, just to name a few things that happened in this episode. Y'all, you're gonna want to get comfy for this one, I'm telling you. So pull up a chair and come lime with. All right, Sara, we are back together again. Yay! Listen, liming with you is always the best. So whether we're recording or not,
We really had to push ourselves to set record.
Yes,
we were just yapping.
We really did. We were just yapping. Yeah, time. We have time. So, but I'm so ready to dig in today because last time when we limed, we talked about, leading when identity is always in the room. And I feel like I don't know if this is like coincidence or if it's just like our way of thinking or, like what we do. But I think we're kind of going deeper into that, but from a slightly different angle. So we're taking it from a different angle. We're changing it up.
We're chopping it up, we're moving it around, we're slotting it where it makes sense.
Exactly. And
we've got to try and keep on topic as well.
Yes, that part. Okay. All right. Because, we were talking about identity, and I think, making that shift into looking at like invisible identities, right? And what that means, the ones that, people don't always see, and also the fact that identity shifts, like we grow, things happen to us, we have big life changes, we lose people, we become parents, we have these like experiences that changes in a way that is a lot of the times internal. So people don't really see the change, it's something that's internal. With that, a lot of questions start coming up in my brain around that. Like I was starting to think back to when I was like working in Japan, and we can get into all of this and how things shifted for me there, and like just how we even like have these conversations in the workplace when we have those invisible shifts that have happened in our identities as leaders, as peers, and even within the organization themselves, right? So that's kind of where my head is going, and some of the threads that, for us to start to pull on and see where this line takes us.
So here for it. I'm ready. Let's pull on those threads.
Okay. So listen, one of the things I brought up to you, right? And I think it's a good place to start as any, right? When we were kind of, having our pre-show chat earlier, was the fact that I didn't realize that I was neurospicy or neurodivergent. Some people like to say neurospicy, some people like to say neurodivergent. I like both. I like spiciness because I feel like I am spicy. But I didn't realize that I was until I would say a few years ago, really. And it was confirmed for me by a medical professional as well that this was the case, that I have ADHD. And I think it brought back for me, like when I was working in Japan, that was the thing I was talking to you about. When I was working in Japan, if I had knew that this was how I think, right?
Mm,
This is the way I think, this is the way my brain works. I feel like so much might, okay, maybe not so much, but a lot of things might have been different in
mhm,
how how I approached things, how I did things, how I communicated with people, how I led because I was leading the university counseling program, like how I explained myself, how I talked to myself
mm,
about being the way I was. I put that in quotes if you're listening, and can't see me, being the way I was. So I feel like that just even having the awareness and the knowledge that you even hold some of
mhm.
these identities, I think is a good place for us to start. And what that would shift within us ourselves first as employees or as leaders,
Yeah, I think so similar to you, I didn't discover my ADHD until essentially when I started my own business. And I think you
Mm,
give yourself so much space to understand that when you're working in maybe a corporate structure or in organizations, you have to apply yourself based on their rules and the things that they think is the best way to work.
yeah.
And you don't realize until you get to the end of the week and you're like, gosh, I am exhausted. And then everybody else talks about the things they did at the weekend. And I was like, gosh, I don't know how anyone has energy for that. Cause I was like, I was fatigued
Yeah.
from the week of work of just trying to be there and do the things the way they do it. When I started working for myself, I realized I didn't have to do those things. And that's when I started to unearth, oh, actually, I was trying to work in an environment that wasn't set up for someone's brain like mine. Hold on a minute. My brain isn't like other people's. What's different about me? And I think the biggest shift for me over the last couple of years since discovering it is realizing that I'm not the problem, the system is. And that's been
Hmm.
such a transformation because I spent a lot of my time in the professional working world being depressed and having really terrible anxiety because I always questioned, why can't I do it this way? Why can't I do that? I constantly berated myself for not being good enough. And I just didn't understand why. I just didn't know why. I just fundamentally thought there was something wrong and broken with me, or I was just lazy and there was just something, at odds. Which is really, really sad that I had to go through that because I obviously didn't have the
Absolutely.
diagnosis or awareness. But I'm in a position now where I've set up a working environment that is really great for me and my brain. And my partner and I often talk about the fact that like I'm completely unrecognizable from where I
Mm,
was 10 plus years ago in terms of like my mental health. Like I
yeah.
definitely, I do have my bouts of depression, don't get me wrong, but they're nowhere near as intense and as frequent as they once were. And my anxiety, like I used to get such terrible anxieties every single morning.
Mm,
Sundays were terrible. Um, and now I don't really have it. Like I do in some regard of like, feeling anxious about a new project and something new, but it's kind of like a nervousness of excitement and things like that.
yeah.
So when you're talking about that transformation, there's been such an internal, like personal journey that I've been on, but also professionally and in workplaces. I don't know if I would have ever been in a position where, to be honest, I don't like to think about what if and what would have been different, but I do worry that actually one of the biggest reasons I started working for myself was because I was like, my mental health can't take this anymore. I can't work for organizations. And we talked about this in the kind of the warm up in the kind of before we hit record. People will meet you and they think that's all you are. And
Yeah.
when they see you after that fact, they base their kind of interpretations of you from that very first instance. So when it comes to friends or family, when it comes to workplaces, when they've known you one way, that's how they're always going to see you. So when you start to evolve or understand more about yourself or even discover new hobbies and do things differently or try new techniques, there can be some weight with that in terms of how people perceive that. And I think that's really challenging. So when you go to a new workplace or you start something new, it's okay that, your decisions about things change or your feelings about something change. If just even your personality shifts, you're not just one thing at
Yes.
any given moment. So yeah, that was a long-winded way to share a little bit about my journey in the ADHDs.
No, no. And I can completely relate because especially as you were talking about the fact that, people only see you the way that they met you, kind of like, after it's very hard for them to sometimes understand
Hmm.
the shifts that are happening, or even if they met you one way and then they see you again 5 years later and you're different, you're like, wait, who are you, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. They remember you as this person. And I think for me, I can so many so many stories about that come up because I've made such big moves in my life. But I remember one of them for me that kind of I had to work through myself over the last few years actually. So that's really top of mind was when I made that shift change from leaving Japan and coming back into the US. So I moved to California right after Japan and I moved into a master's program, right? Where I also worked on campus and things like that. So I moved into an education, higher ed kind of space. But for me, I was leaving Japan with a lot of trauma attached to
Mm.
me. So the way I showed up, the person that I showed up as in that program was a very different Abbiola than is showing up right now on this podcast. Back then, and what, that was 2016? 2016, oh my God, that was 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Sorry, that just hit.
Time
Boom.
flies.
Time flies. But 10 years ago, I would not be doing this. I would not be
Mm.
having this conversation, video and audio, right? That I was going to put out there for the people, the masses to listen to because the things that had happened, and I won't go into all of that, the things that happened to me over the 10 years that I lived in Japan, not all bad, not all great, right? It's just like those little pokes that happened over the times, right? By the time I left and came into a new arena, I was felt small.
Mm.
And I had to find this person again. So the people who met me there met me as someone who was trying to get over a lot of trauma and trying to find herself, but also back in a new culture, back in a different culture again, because before I hadn't lived, California and New York are very different. I'm going to put it out there. It's a very different culture than New York. I'd lived in New York, right? I knew New York and I knew that style, but California was Northern California was very different for me, and I'm meeting people from all over, but it
Mm.
was still like now I had to be in this space where I was just like, I don't know who I am anymore and I don't know how to show up
Mm.
anymore, but I'm trying here. And that's how they met me, right? So of course, master's program, you're making all these connections, you're networking, you're doing all these things, you're, interviewing for jobs, all this kind of stuff. But you're like, my God, this is how they probably think
Mm.
of me. So over the years, now that I've, gotten through that and gone through that, come to terms with the ADHD of it all and all those things, right? I am this person. I'm not that Abbiola anymore.
Mm.
Yes, there's pieces of her still within me, always will be, right? But I've done a lot of internal work in order to get me to the space now where I have more confidence, where I have,
Mm.
less anxiety. I won't say it's gone altogether. It has not. You still get it, right? But, and as you said, running my own business is how it really, opens all the doors in your life, right? And you like all the doors, the windows, the little cubby hole, whatever, it opens everything and makes you take it out and look at it, right?
Mhm.
And I think I'm going to place with this. And I think all of that, like what you said basically brought all that back up for me because I'm like, yeah, because I think one of the things I have some of my really close friends I still have are from who I met back then. And I think they do see the growth in me, but I think about what if, and I know we said we didn't like what if, but I think about this in terms of if I was still working in the organization I worked in then to who I am now, I think they would be very, very confused.
They were like, "Who is this person?"
Like, who are you? Right? So I think like and I feel like, these are things that can happen, like the shifts can happen over time, or the identities could have always been there,
Mm.
but you just became aware of them and are now moving differently because you're aware of it
Yes.
now.
Do you know do you know what that makes me think about is my whole life, everyone has always known me as a woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they know me as she, her, they know me as Sara. I'm a woman. And when I started my business, I think, you know, the journey of finding out about my ADHD and unearthing a lot about my neurodivergence, it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, hold on a minute, I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere in the sense of like certain aspects of my identity. And I remember having a really frank conversation with my partner, because obviously me and my partner have been together for, gosh, how long we've been together now? Almost 15 years, which is a very long time.
Congratulations.
And thank you so much. We've been together a very, very long time. And with that, you know, as we talked about, people will know you from when they met you. Who I was 15 years ago and who my partner was 15 years ago, very, very different. But there's one thing to be like, okay, your behaviors and your hobbies and your interests change. Is one thing to be like, hold on a minute, I think my gender identity is changing. That's a big old conversation to have with somebody. And obviously my partner was the most important person to have that discussion with. And when I basically was, I think I was putting together like a slide, or I was doing some research for Pride Month, and I came across like the term pangender, and I was like, interesting, this is intriguing. Let me find out more about it. And everything that it said just felt really aligned with how I felt, which is I don't like feel a certain way where sorry, hold on. I think my dog wants attention. You know, I don't feel any way about someone seeing me as a woman. Like, that's how I've been socialized. That's how the world sees me. That's just like the social structure we live in. That's fine. I don't actually mind that. But I don't see myself as just a woman, you know, in terms of the biology and the anatomy. Like, I believe in, you know, my spirituality and reincarnation. I see evolutions, whether it's in one lifetime or several lifetimes. You know, I see us as fluid beings. And so seeing myself as such a static, like binary in terms of the gender system that we have, I was like, it doesn't quite feel right to me. It feels so like restrictive. And pangender is like seeing myself as like quite expansive, and that, you know, I am all genders at all given time, and I can float and be fluid through all of those. And so navigating that is really challenging. And I can imagine a lot of people that are trans or non-binary, like having to come out later on in life, and the journey that you must have to go through to speak to those that you love, your friends, your family, in the workplace even. Like, I can't imagine I would have just stayed as I was if I was in you know, in an office environment. As much as they probably would have said, hey, we're inclusive, I probably would have really struggled with it, because I would have been like, are they going to understand? Are they going to just be like, you know, she's attention seeking, or they want that, and, you know, all of these things. And so it's really interesting talking about that shift in identity, because that's a big transformation that people can go through. And it's just, you know, as leaders, as managers, as friends, as family, as colleagues, when we meet somebody, we're seeing them in that specific chapter in their life. We're not seeing the whole book in that one moment. You know, a person isn't just that one thing in one moment. You know, we're seeing so many different parts of them. And, you know, even if someone was to say, this is my identity, I've seen it. And I know it happens where people figure out that they have ADHD, and then they're like, oh shit, I might also have autism, and they're all ADHD, you know. So we're always discovering more and more about ourselves. And the more we unlock that, and we're in safe spaces where people see that with open arms, the more we can embrace people for who they truly are, and people can live happier lives. Is when we try to push people into boxes because of what we think we know of them, and the assumptions that we have that really restrict people's evolution, and ultimately restricts not only their happiness, but our happiness within that community too.
Absolutely agree with everything you're saying. And one of the things that pop up for me as you were saying that, this idea that, you know, I think we aren't really aware of the fact that this idea around disclosure, like disclosing, you know, yes, my pronouns have changed, or my gender identity is changing, or even disclosing, look, I am neurodivergent in this way, or even disclosing like I have anxiety, or all these things. Disclosure can be a very uncomfortable conversation or high stakes conversation to have with someone, depending on the, you know, if you want to get into technical terms and all of that, but depending on the power structure that, you know, the power relationship that's happening there, whether they're, you know, your director, or whether they are your direct report, or even whether they're a peer, or whether they're a friend, or a, you know, parent to you, or a child, or a partner, right? Once you've figured it out internally, now to like, that's already uncomfortable conversations you're having with yourself.
Because you question yourself, right? Because you're just like, hold on, am I overthinking this now?
Right.
And you start to think, am I just spending too much time in my own thoughts with my own personality? Like maybe I need
Yeah.
to like do other things, but you can't escape yourself. I'm sorry, but
No,
there's no
no.
way. We're staying here.
It's like when myself is ready to have a meeting with me, we're having that meeting, right? I
Yeah,
can't run away.
do not disturb is very focused meeting we
Exactly.
need to have.
Exactly. But yeah, so we're having them internally. But now this idea that we have to, okay, disclose this to the world around us, our orbit, at least to start with, right? No one's saying you have to go out there and put it all over the gram or, TikTok or something like that,
Although if that's what you want to do,
If that's what
go
you
do
want to
that.
do, exactly, go for it. But I mean,
No,
starting
I know.
with
Yeah, it's a big jump, isn't it? Like internal
the
conversations
big
and
jump,
conflict. And then, right, it's everywhere.
it's online.
I've arrived.
If you see it, you see it. If you don't, you don't.
If you know, you know.
Exactly. But no, it's such we don't realize how tough that can be, And then there's the disclosure piece, right? Your disclosure. But now it's other people, things you can't control, right? Having to now, for example, use the right pronouns when referring to you, right? Or, not make jokes about ADHD or anxiety. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm trying to come up with examples in my head. But these different things. Now it's time. So those people have to shift, right? As well.
And they've not had and I think they've not had as much time as you have
Yes.
to go through it.
Yes.
Because we've been in our heads a long time. So we've had a long time to
Exactly.
get to this point. But other people,
Exactly.
it might be the first time they're hearing this and it's a
Yeah.
shock. Yeah.
It is. Sorry, my hand movements were getting like really, really, really strong there. Because yes, exactly. Your brain and my brain are very aligned right now because that is exactly the point I was trying to make. It takes time for other people to shift. And, one of the things I've come across in, my work and the things that I do is it's hard for the person who's made the disclosure. Now that we have to sit and watch people bumble through the shifting, it's difficult, right? And I think we've also society as a whole, right now, like let's go back. I know we wanted to stay with just us, but let's go back out into this world that we live
Don't
in
make
right
me do
now.
it. Don't make me do it,
I know.
Abbiola.
I don't want to either, but just for a little bit, the world right now it kind of still has us thinking, if someone doesn't get it instantly, they don't care. Or if it takes them, more than a couple weeks to get it, they don't care. But is that the case actually? No, I don't think that's the case. Yeah, okay. Yes, there may be some people out there that don't care, but we're talking about the people who do, the people who are trying, but the people who are still making mistakes. Right? How do you, as a person who is, and not, you don't have to answer this. This is just a rhetorical question. But as a person who is now, who has disclosed, right? Now you're here sitting in the fact that, okay, they're going to use their own pronouns sometimes. How am I going to respond to that when that happens, right? How am I going to feel when that happens? What if it continues to happen for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? Is there a time limit that they should get it right? Or they should have it perfectly? You know what I mean? Is there one? I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
Right?
I think there's so much that is so context based because I think, for example, like
absolutely.
if it's someone that you have a really strong, deep relationship with, there's kind of maybe two sides to it. You might have a more grace than the regular person, or you actually might have more expectations on them because of that, right? So I think in all aspects, we could have more grace with people. I'm not saying to the extent that if someone is continually harming you, that you have to put your feelings aside and like make space for them. Like some people, we need to just push them aside because they are not willing to see you for your full self. But I am constantly around people that love me and I love them. They trip up, as do I. Like I bumble around like a muppet so many times. Like I'm not a perfect person. None of us are, and no one is expecting that. And I think that's why sometimes there's these like such heated moments because people are thinking that perfection is warranted and needed, but actually we just want you to see us. If you get it wrong every now and again, like if you get it intentionally wrong, then that's a different matter. But if you're just bumbling around like the rest of us on this planet who really, we're all trying to figure it out together, then, that's okay. Like if you're going to get it wrong or, you make a joke and it doesn't quite land, like it's okay. Like as long as you're not being harmful and trying to do something to the detriment of someone's well-being, then I'm cool, and I think that's the challenge. And I think actually what you were saying about like disclosure, and I think that's the potential power we have as understanding our neurodivergence and thinking about people who are discovering their neurodivergence later on in life and being in the workplace and sharing that with their managers and leaders. The power in that room is that you have known this longer than they have. So you can come equipped in the room to say, these are the things that I need to do my job well. When we are kind of passive in that space and we're like, this is what's going on, we do have to expect that the manager or the leader or the person in the room is going to bumble around and not know what to do, because not everybody that has ADHD is exactly the same to one another. Like ADHD presents differently in different people, the same with many neurodivergent conditions. So one accommodation that might work for you, Abbiola, is not going to work for me. And something that will work for me is not going to maybe work for you. And there might be things that are mutually beneficial to the both of us, but we're not both exactly the same in our neurodivergence. And so it is so individualized. So the power we have when we know about our neurodivergence is to go equipped in that room to say, if it's possible with my ADHD, I really struggle with, my timeliness. If I could start at a later stage and work a bit later, that would suit me fine. But for somebody else, that might not work for them, So it's just about having that, feeling empowered enough to do that. And obviously it is dependent on if the manager is willing to hear that and make those accommodations. But that's maybe a story for another day.
But no, I mean, even jumping into that though, right? Because as the leader, because I know like a lot of leaders are listening to this podcast, right? As the leader itself, like what are you doing in that situation? Especially if you're the one that has the neurodivergence, you're the one who's shifted in identities and stuff like that. How are you having these conversations with your peers, with your direct reports, right? And how are you asking for, how are you disclosing, how are you asking for what you need in that as well, because yes, as someone who holds a little more of the power, that still doesn't mean that you don't need support as well, because again, human beings, right? All make mistakes, all things. And I think it shifts a little bit in that now you're in this place of maybe they holding some of the control and how they respond to you when you disclose what you have to disclose. If you're following that, good on you. But I followed it in my brain, right? But you know what I mean? So now the power kind of shifts a little bit, in that space. How are you going to react to that when there's that shift? It tells us a lot about ourselves. We learn a lot about ourselves. Now we have to come back and get internal again when that happens and fix that.
And the morning, dear diary, it happened again. I'm in my brain.
Exactly. But like you said, right? Context matters. And I think there's a lot of nuance to it as well, depending on where you are in the workplace and what's placed there. And like you said, the relationships that you have with people as well, like how close you are, how comfortable you feel actually, bringing things up with them. And I would also even say a big part of this is the culture that has been, the foundation that has been built within the team, within the organization itself, within, whatever space that you are in. The foundation that has built kind of helps with the navigation of this a little bit more, than if there was like no foundation and nothing. We're just all free for all. Just let's just do it, no one cares about the person. It's just about, that's an extreme that I'm bringing up there. You get what I'm saying though, right? As the leader, because sometimes, we forget that this is gonna sound so corny, but leaders are people too.
They
And I
are, yeah.
don't mean that in a in a joking. I said it in a joking way because it sounded corny in my head, but it's true, right? There's
Hmm.
a truth to it. And especially, I think about new leaders I've worked with. There's so much, you're going in there wanting to do a good job you know, to especially if you hold values where you're like, I want to be an inclusive leader. I
Yeah.
believe in, equity. I believe that everyone has a voice and I want to uplift the voices of others in this room. How am I doing that for myself?
I also think leaders that have that kind of approach and mindset typically are far more empathetic in
Absolutely.
general as people. But I also think that they struggle with that as well. So, in
Hmm.
terms of when they're providing feedback or when they're
Hmm.
having discussions or leading meetings, because of that empathy, and empathy, I think, is very important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say it
Hmm.
in the way that it might sound, and I'll try and not make it sound that way, but it can trip us up.
Yeah.
So, for example, when somebody gets, pronouns wrong, they kind of fumble and they're like, oh shit, no, I didn't mean that. I meant these pronouns. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And like over apologizing. And that's like one example of it. But that can come into
Hmm.
the way that we're then leaders because we're so conscious of trying to make people feel included and we want to be empathetic that we don't give guidance. We don't give
Yeah.
direction. We're not we then maybe fall into the more of the insecure side of things of, oh, am I good enough to be a leader? Am I inclusive enough to do this? Am I thinking about people
Exactly.
enough? And I think that comes from a really, really well-intentioned, beautiful place in terms of them as a human. But I think the people then they're managing can feel a little bit like, where do we go from here? We're looking to our leaders to give us direction, to give us guidance. So we're not asking for perfect people. We're asking for a leader to show us the way. And if they're too apologetic in the sense of it's yes apologize but let's move on to what's the agenda like what do we need to do, let's get on with it.
Hmm.
Can't we need that from our leaders, especially the ones that are really looking out for us.
Yeah.
We see that, we know that's what you're doing, and so when you get it wrong we have grace for you, don't worry, like we know you're not a bad person. There's plenty of other leaders that we can turn our heads towards and be like, yeah, let's not have any empathy and grace for them, but we do for these particular leaders, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and we know that everybody's in a journey. We were talking about identity. We know that those leaders in that space that are like that, they're
Hmm.
shifting in their learning and their
Yeah.
growth, as are we. We all are.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure it all out on this floating rock in the middle of the universe. Like,
Listen, I don't know who said that life should be figured out by the time you're in your 40s. Lies. Lies. I tell you,
what?
lies.
What? I was hoping and praying it all be figured out soon, but okay,
Oh,
fine.
let me tell you something. No. Okay?
Oh
No.
gosh. Should we try again in our 50s?
I mean, we can.
But I have a funny
We can.
feeling.
I have a funny feeling that that's not going to be the case, you know? No, because it's true though. We tend to overthink. We tend to, you know, co- overcorrect, right? Sometimes to our detriment,
Mm,
and positive intentions. There's another case of positive intentions not always having a positive impact, right? Because sometimes it could be, not too great. But I think if we can just remember nothing else, and I don't know how we got here, but that we are imperfect beings also. And remember that if you remember that for yourself, also remember that for others, and that it's okay. Because sometimes you feel like, especially I think when you're in that leadership position, if I make a mistake, people are going to think, fill in the blank about
mhm,
and I feel like so many, I've heard it from so many, I've felt it when I led team, right? Like if I even don't show weakness,
mm,
or else kind of thing. But it's not the case, right? And I think that, like you said, there are people out there who also hold similar
mm,
values and who also think similarly in their like, I want grace, so I know I will give them grace too.
mm. I think
It's
that's so important when you said about like My brain's gone because I was too busy thinking it's just classic ADHD. I'm like, I had a perfect sentence in my brain. I was like, I want to definitely
Do
say
it all
that, so
the
don't
time.
forget that. And then I was like, but what was Abbiola saying that I wanted to also share back? Damn, I've lost the whole thing.
This is what happens. This is what happens. That's okay. That's okay.
I think I was going to say something around the fact that like we're all working and living in a system that isn't built for us in the sense of neurodivergent,
Yes.
you know, all the identities that we hold. We're existing
Yeah.
in a system that was inherently built for somebody else that's not us.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're seeing is that play out on a bigger scale, in the sense of when we look at, what's going on politically and things like that, the people that we're seeing represented in those positions of power is because the system was built in a way to have that happen. The system wasn't built for us. And I think um having grace for the fact that we're all operating in that is really messed up, and it's
Yeah.
really difficult to navigate those spaces, and we're not expecting anybody to get it perfect because we're all swimming in this, right? We're all navigating this, so it's really hard for us to almost completely detach ourselves from that. So there will be moments where, because we live in an ableist society, we're no doubt going to have ableist thoughts or behaviors and microaggressions and things like that, and it's such a shame. We can do the unlearning, we can show ourselves different ways of thinking and behave differently, absolutely, but we also have to have grace that these things will just slip out, just unintentionally, unconsciously, because that is the society we live in. We're not living and breathing separately to that. So I don't know if that was definitely what I was going to share a moment ago, but that's what I'm sharing now. But that's where my brain went.
It works for me. No, and I absolutely agree with you. And I can keep going on and on and on and on and on. We don't have enough time.
I
Part 3,
know. Where
people.
is that
Part
time
3.
gone?
Part 3. All right, it's gonna come
Mhm.
because we just need to keep going. But Sara, you know the drill
Mhm.
already. It's time for us to do say it with your whole chest. I think let's get in. For people new to listening to us here today, this is where we drop the filter. We've been doing that, but we say the thing. I let my guests say the thing that they really believe. It might be uncomfortable. It might not be popular. It might also be something tender. It might be loud, but it's honest, right? So, Sara, the floor is yours. Say it with your whole chest.
Community is meant to be uncomfortable.
I don't know if they're ready for that one, but yes.
So what I
Say
mean
it.
by community is meant to be uncomfortable is, I think we're moving into spaces and building what we call community as essentially closed groups with like-minded individuals, with everybody saying yes to doing all the same things, which I guess in some respect works. But if we want a true community, we need to hang out with the people that we also find really annoying, or we find them weird, or we find them frustrating. That is what community is about. It's about being in a community where, oh, I really don't want to help that person with this thing and move their sofa into the other room. You have to get up and go and do that. That is what community is all about. We have to look after each other and do the stuff that we're like,
Yes.
this is a bit of a nuisance, but actually it's really important. And I think there's so much in this world where we're always prioritizing potentially our own well-being over the well-being of our community.
I absolutely agree with you. You want to know what comes up for me as soon as you said that, the thing that popped into my brain was, yes, I don't like my brother and sister every day. I love them, but I don't like them every day. But sometimes when he says, "Hey, you gonna buy dinner tonight?" Even though they pissed me off earlier that morning, I'm like, all right, fine, I'll buy dinner tonight. You know what I mean? Or
Mm-hmm.
can you help me do something? Because I'm sure my brother, when I say, I'm leaving for the airport at 3 a.m., are you taking me? He's probably like, I don't really like her right now,
But we do it.
but he's going to take me to the airport for 3 a.m., you know? Because she's off again, kind of
Mm,
thing, right? But like in a familiar way. But I
mm.
think it also goes with community, right? I agree. There are things that will be uncomfortable, but if we're truly building a community, it's not going to be all roses all the time,
Not
you know?
at all.
It's not going to be. I love that. I love that. All right, Sara. Okay. Thank you. Uh,
Thank
It's
you for
so good
having
learning
me.
with you.
Honestly, it's so much fun
I
to learn
can't.
together. I
I
really
can't.
enjoy it.
Me too. So do I. I mean, I just love just the way your brain works, just the conversations that we have, just how we just, get you
We
there. I got
vibe,
you there. We
the
vibe,
alignment.
the alignment. But as we do, before we wrap,
Mhm.
please tell the people where they can find you.
Absolutely. So if you like what I had to say, you might enjoy seeing my content on Instagram and LinkedIn. So Instagram, it's fresh and fearless_UK. And then it's just Sara Chandran on LinkedIn. So you can connect with me there and DM me. I'm always up for a coffee chat. So if you actually want to have a one-to-one, then just give me a message. I'm always down to network and meet new people.
And she's not lying because that's how we met.
It
Okay,
is.
people.
It really
That is
is.
how we met. Right? One of us rolled into the other's DMs. We slid
And
in
look
there.
what beauty happens as a result.
Look at that. Continents away. And we're still, got it going.
Hmm.
My goodness. But thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. Can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, bring it on. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. To everyone listening, thank you for aligning with us today. Genuinely. Whether you've been here from the beginning or this is your first time, I'm so grateful that you chose to spend this time with us. And if this conversation resonated with you, please share it with a colleague, a friend, someone you think needs to hear this. And also, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever, so you don't miss the next one. You can also join our mailing list at ferneducationstudios.com for resources and updates that don't make it onto this feed. This kind of conversation is also at the heart of the work that I do at Fern Education Studios, working with managers, directors, and mid-career professionals on the uncomfortable workplace conversations that matter the most. If that's something you want to explore, you can learn more at ferneducationstudios.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for Abbiola Ballah. And all of these links will be in the show notes. So until next time, my friends, keep liming, keep listening, keep learning.